Once again, welcome to Herd Immunity News. I'm Marcus Botza. Today, I have the great pleasure in welcoming back a friend of ours and someone who I've followed for a very long time now, Mr. David Vance. David is much more than a political commentator. The man is a thinker. He will say what many people will not say, and he does it in such an artistic and pleasurable way that we recommend you check out his fantastic davidvance.net, and we will leave all the links to that. But without me going any further, can I say, David, how are you today, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for inviting me back as well. I mean, actually, just as we talk at this point in time, I've just become a grandfather for the fourth time. My daughter gave birth on Sunday night to my fourth grandchild, my second grandson. So I like to think, if nothing else, that the Vance hegemony is extending, and we're doing our bit to try and prop up flailing UK fertility levels. But yeah, so I was in visiting my little grandson, 24 hours old, yesterday, and he's just got home today. So that's the big thing for me.
Well, listen, let me pass on belated congratulations and my very best wishes to you, to your daughter, and to the wee one and themselves. And they hope that they listen to the great advice and wisdom that comes out of their grandfather. Now, since we last spoke, which was back in October last year, there's been a lot of goings on, and if we can just take you into Northern Ireland, into the election and appointment of Sinn Fein, of Michelle O'Neill. This is the first thing that we really want to speak to you about, to see what's happened in Northern Ireland that puts Sinn Fein as the First Minister chair there. What happened?
Well, what happened is, and it's amazing that it's October since we spoke last. It only seems like yesterday. What happened is the thing that I was dreading. I think when I've previously spoken about Northern Ireland, I was always so happy that the Stormont Assembly was basically in suspended animation, that the politicians couldn't get their hands on the levers of power. That pleased me enormously. When it collapsed in 22, I was happy, because I basically despise devolution in every regard. I think it's unhelpful, and so we got away for a couple of years, with nothing. It's great, and then it came back in January. It was forced back. I think Northern Ireland had to be in lockstep with the rest of the UK, and in many regards the rest of the world. So we then had what actually happened was the DUP did a strange sort of deal, very strange deal, Marcus, strange deal that resulted in their glorious leader, Mr. Jeffrey Donaldson, having to then take a back seat from his role as leader of the DUP. I believe he's also about to step down entirely from politics as he fights to clear his name from certain allegations, which we won't go into. But basically, he brought his party back into the Assembly, which triggered essentially the return of the Assembly, with Sinn Fein IRA in pole position and the DUP in secondary pole position. And since then, we've now got all the nonsense that you guys have had in Scotland, and, hate crime. Are we going to have a hate crime bill? And don't forget the trans agenda and all this crap that we have been spared. And this is, honestly, politicians are a plague, in my view anyway. Politicians are a plague upon us. They don't do anything constructive at all. They've got their little pathetic, narrow, sectional, almost fetishes, I would say, and they pursue them. And that's what's happening here now. So we have as I said, the return of the IRA Sinn Fein-led Assembly, weak unionists of all sort going along with it. So that annoys me as a unionist. And it's going to go from bad to worse. Like, that's the only thing I can predict, is they will go from bad to worse. They will run, like all the devolved assemblies, to Westminster with their begging bowl. More money for us, please, so we can splash it up against the wall. That's what they do. And that's how they buy votes. And so, honestly, I'd just like to see all the devolved assemblies reduced to metaphorical ashes, and we don't need the politicians, I think, anyway. Westminster, I'm not that happy with, but I'll settle for that central form of government for the UK with limited powers, and get rid of, Holyrood, get rid of Stormont, get rid of the Welsh in Cardiff, get rid of it all. But that's been the change here, and it's been a change for the worse, as I predicted.
As you predicted, and it was an excellent point you made, comparing Sinn Fein to the SNP. Now this so-called narrative that they use of nationalism, of wanting independence and devolution, the game must be up by now when you see, as you correctly pointed out, the trans agenda, net zero, open borders. They seem to have more in common with the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab than they do with any idea of nationalism.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the huge irony. I mean, life's full of ironies at this point in the game. but one of the huge ironies for me is when you hear Irish nationalists blather on about Irish unity, and my response is, unity with what? Somalia, Nigeria? Where are you going to be united with? You look at the demographic changes, Marcus, happening in the Irish Republic. Sinn Fein, globalist party, like all the others, they've been bought lock, stock, and barrel. And we had the hilarity the other week, I'm sure you saw it, of the Irish suddenly turning around and saying, we're sick of taking... The Irish government was demanding the return of the border, which couldn't be brought back after Brexit, because apparently that would have caused a return of the so-called Troubles. So we couldn't have it back in 2016. But now they're saying, hang on a second, you bad Brits, you are bussing migrants down to good old Dublin. And mind you, if you've seen some of the footage on the banks of the Liffey tent village, so we've seen that. So basically, Ireland is being transmogrified by vast numbers of migrants, and Sinn Féin go along with it. So it's just like the SNP in Scotland, they're the same. These are fake nationalists. They're fake patriots, and they have sold themselves out to the globalist WEF agenda, and so there's no difference between any of them. Equally contemptible.
Equally contemptible, equally pathetic. And speaking of pathetic, Leo Varadkar just been seen off the premises, and obviously Mr. Varadkar ticked all the boxes when it came to the black and ethnic minority candidates. It came to alternative, shall we say, sexual preferences. But there we go, as you said. The newly appointed Taoiseach, Simon Harris, demanding a border that be put across. I mean, this stuff is absolute sheer comedy. It must make you sometimes think, can it get any worse?
Yeah, it always can. It always can. Simon Harris, who got elected on the 15th count in his 15th count. That's how popular our Simon is. So he's the one that's temporarily replaced, as you say, Leo Varadkar down in Dublin. I mean, a joke. Irish Prime Minister. He won't last beyond the election next year. But in the meantime, honestly, I look to retain sanity. I look upon it with a sort of dark humor, because at this point in the game, by 2015, the Irish are gone. They're gone. The demographics are against them. They can't sustain themselves. And so by 2050, they'll be a minority in their own country. And they might find that the people that become the majority aren't quite as accommodating as they have been. And I always try to give hope, don't like to black pill everybody. But at this point in time, there does seem to be a level of, an awakening. Irish people saying, and I'm talking about ordinary Irish people, not the political elite, saying, hang on a second, we're living in a small village, a couple hundred people, and you're trying to bus in a couple of hundred migrants and put them up in a local hotel. No. So there is a wee bit of an awakening, and I look upon that positively. There's going to be council elections and Euro elections in Dublin, in Ireland, in June next month. So that might be the Irish independence. Let's call them. Then they are independents. They seem to be capturing as much of the vote as Simon Harris's party. They're in about 23% of the vote. If that translates, that'll be pretty seismic, and maybe there's hope for Ireland. But if there is, and it's the same for us in the UK, it's going to come from the people up, not from the politicians down.
Absolutely, and you can see the anger, the fear the loathing of the measures that have been taken, as you correctly say, tiny Irish Republican villages are now being absolutely changed forever. I think the population's gone up nearly 1.5 to 2 million in 5 or 6 years. This is happening at light speed. And you have the situation, I'll just say, put it too quickly, where you're seeing unionists and Republicans laying down their arms and actually getting together to fight against these measures.
Well, this is very much what I did back in 2020. As someone who might have been perceived as a pretty hardline unionist, let's put it, although I don't think it was, but I'm very principled, let's put it like that. But I have great commonality with my people who would have been in sort of broadly speaking Irish patriots, Irish nationalists, maybe even Irish Republicans who wanted Ireland to regain its independence from the European Union back in 2016 when we supposedly, or didn't really, but we were supposed to Brexit and all that. And so I find that Marcus, this is the way it is now. It's not the old ideological battles till a degree are over. It's not right versus left, really. It's right versus wrong. It's good versus evil. That's where we actually are. So I have huge commonality with my friends in Dublin and elsewhere in Ireland who see this existential crisis being imposed upon them. And Ireland it's a wee bit like maybe Wales, say, where it's not there's not as many people there as there is, say, in Scotland, and let alone England. So it can change, the demographic change can be very, very fast. The frog is being boiled in the water quite quickly. So this is the moment for them to waken up, and I support them, and every chance I get, I do my best to try and push out their stuff when they're sort of saying, enough of this. But the big problem for the Irish is, and is a problem for all of us, Ireland has a small media, a small elite media, basically focused around RTE, which is a state broadcaster, and a couple of the major newspapers. They're bought and paid for. They're absolutely, like the BBC, bought and paid for. So they will play down Irish protests. They will make it seem as if the Irish people that are protesting about the removal of their culture are racists. And it's the same trick that they play on us as well. But I see that as a problem. But thank goodness we do have, such as it is, social media. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, but it's being used quite well by these Irish independent folks who are trying to get out what's happening. And there's a resonance there. And something, it's coming from the Irish working class men and women. These are the people who have suddenly, latterly come to the fore and said, this has to stop. We don't want this. Not putting up with it. So in a way, I stand with the Irish rebels. There you go.
And it's incredible, and so do we. And so do we. And we would say we were definitely politically aligned with yourself, David. I mean, we've had friends of ours at Herd Immunity News go out and wave the tricolour in the streets of Dublin. Now, these are hardcore Brexiteers. These are hardcore unionists that have made the decision to lay down any axes from the past or gripes that we've had in the past for a much bigger and greater cause. But can I put it to you that there's reports coming from the Republic of Ireland to say that the new arrivals, shall we say, are being given special rules and regulations, and background checks, for example, are being waived completely so that they can become police, so that they can run for office? Is this happening?
Absolutely. And it's funny you should say that, actually, because when I've got this here on my phone. I was out this afternoon and I happened to see, if I can just discard it, hang on a second. I'm doing this on the hoof. This is, I don't know if we can show you this. It's a headline in the Irish Daily Mail today. And this is the front page headline: record high of migrants running in elections. That's the headline in the Irish Daily. Record high. Yeah. So I look upon them as essentially an invading force. I think it's a political invasion, so they're going to put them into high office. But hey, I tell you what, I mean, and I also think, by the way, I'm going to jump in a second to one of my favorite topics, which is related to this. But you're right. I mean, these people are being facilitated. There's villages being built, camps, which look terribly like a bit like military camps. You might say, if you were to have your little WEF army in Ireland, that's where you'd put them. So it's disturbing. It's very disturbing. But it's also disturbing here in Northern Ireland. And this, indulge me in this one for a sec.
Yeah,
so we have now got in Northern Ireland, which shows you that this is a UK and Ireland thing. We've got our first Masai, and yes, you heard me right, Masai enthusiast mayor of Londonderry / Derry. This I couldn't make it up. This lady who was she was selected, never elected. She was selected by SDLP Sinn Fein to become the first citizen of our second city. And her interests are the Masai women. Now, I didn't think we had a lot of Masai women in Northern Ireland. I mean, Kenya's quite a distance away. Didn't think there was a big constituency, but apparently Masai is really important. And she also, I mean, she's comedy gold. She's come out and talked about the fact that, typical race grifter, she's been talking about the fact that, get this, people forget that Black people built Ireland. Well, yeah, they really didn't. Wow. They really, really didn't. The ethnic population of Ireland for most of its history is like 0.01%. But this is the sort of grift that we're seeing. And so whether it's in the south or whether it's in the north, they're trying to essentially pave over everything that made our nations great and replace it with this homogenous pro-trans, pro-race grifting, anti-Christian narrative, So that's why I laugh at the fact that Northern Ireland's got its first Masai warrior as the mayor of Londonderry, and we've got our first gay mayor, self-declared gay mayor of Belfast as well. So it's a woke, it's a tide, Marcus. It's coming in, and the best thing we can do, I think, is mock it. I enjoy doing that. I enjoy mocking it. It's better to do that than just get angry. But also point out some of the inconsistencies, like, there's not a lot of Masai people, not a lot of them. Oh, by the way, the person concerned, she comes from, I believe it's, Masai royalty. But for some reason, she had to flee to seek sanctuary in the UK. So there you go. Strange story, but totally true. Check it out.
And the reasons and the rationale for more people coming over from Africa is absolutely ridiculous. So we're hearing stuff that they're war torn, or they're gay, or they are being oppressed because they're Christians, and they're as much Christians in many cases. Now, some of them genuinely are, but there is as much Christians as I am a Mau Mau fighter pilot. And the narrative's bought and the narrative's purchased. But what really worries me as well is we did a story on the care sector. Now, one of the major employment zones for the new arrivals is the care sector. Now, if you or I were to go as a carer, as a profession, our background checks would go back to 16, 15 years of old, to your first paper round or wherever you work, David. These new arrivals start after 6 months. Now, what could go wrong?
I know, but it's horrific, really, Marcus, when you said, because the people in these care homes are most definitely our most vulnerable people, vulnerable elderly people with dementia and all kinds of conditions, and they totally rely on the care staff. And when you're not doing the adequate checks into the care staff, then that's a big problem. And of course, that's also caveated with the fact that it was in the same care homes back in 2020 that they medazzalumed a whole pile of these elderly people off this planet, totally unforgivable. And we mustn't remember that anyway. So I always think the care sector is an oxymoron. There's little care there, even as it is. But when you bring in these new arrivals, then God help the elderly people. I remember my father towards the end of his life, and he had to go into the care home just towards the very end. different issues. But, you know, I could see he was so frail and so weak. And even then, and that was in 2007, even then, the people that were looking after him, the care home was, let's put it like this, it was sufficiently Eastern European diverse back then, right? 2024, I think the diversity is probably spread a wee bit. So I don't frankly think that, as you say, I don't think you or I would probably get a job in the care center, because they'd do a background check and they'd say all this awful stuff about me, always this, that, and the other. So no chance of me getting a job. You might be in trouble too. But if you arrive from the shores of distant Africa, come on in. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Answer everything.
Absolutely. And to us, this is a security breach. This is national security, not just the fact that we've got every potential criminal on the run from Europe. Every fugitive can wipe the slate clean. But not only that, you can come into a hospital environment and go into a care home setting. Now, these people could be saints or they could be sinners, but I'm not willing to take that chance. The person that got in touch with us, David, his mother was given a care plan, a care package, just coming out of hospital, 87-year-old. The first person that comes in to see her is an African man. Now, you're talking about bathing. You're talking about intimate washing. Now, who's going to believe an old lady with dementia to say that he did this, he did that? Now, we're not saying that that individual did anything, but that was the last time that that family got involved with that company. What do you think when you hear stories like that?
I mean, honestly, it's horrible. It's horrible. It's almost like a ritual, a humiliation ritual on our elderly and all the politicians involved in facilitating this, because ultimately it's politically sanctioned. It's politically signed off on. You know, they should all be up in Nuremberg 2.0 for so many different reasons, but this is one of them. And you know, it's a bit like we saw in the news in the past 24 hours, all about this the infected blood issue, and that's coming out like 50 years later since this first started in the 1970s. And I fear, Marcus, that the things that you're talking about, you've talked to me about some of these potential people who are coming into the care centre, we mightn't get the full-on expurgated horror for another 50 years. This is the game that they play. They kick it down the can. Like, never mind what we'll find about COVID in the care homes and the hospitals and all the rest of it. So yeah, I mean, it's a constant existential crisis. A battle we're in, actually, I suppose you could say. But I always, final thought on this, I think you judge a country on how it takes care of its elderly people, who are often its frailest and most vulnerable people. That's a measure of, you know, how decent a country is. Now, if we as a country are exposing our elderly, as you said, to essentially unvetted people from the third world,
I mean, it's absolutely disgusting and it's disgraceful. And obviously I'll be called a racist for saying that, but we don't care what colour they are. If you can't do background checks, then you wouldn't get through an airport. If you can't go through a scanner or show documentation, you couldn't go through an airport, but you can rock up to the UK and get a job. Now, on to the next subject.
Yeah.
You mentioned rituals. Now,
yes,
you were one of the people who we really followed very closely on this when the EuroVision Song Contest 2024 came out, where the act from Ireland performed a demonic ritual live on stage as a representative of Ireland. Yep. We were told it was called an Abramelin ritual, which was summoning the demon gods, summoning Satan live on stage. Yep. What the hell is going on here, David?
Oh, I know. I mean, I did go on about it quite a bit. And in fairness, some of the stuff I put out got a fair bit of traction. So, I mean, I'm of an age where I can remember back in 1970, Dana was the Irish European entry, and she won with a lovely, sweet little song called All Kinds of Everything. I remember that. I was young, but I remember it. And you go from, and this is symbolic of the times in which we live. Innocence wins in 1970. Fast track to 2024. Bambi Thug, self-declared witch, queer witch, her words, not mine, The queers are coming, quote unquote. That's what she said after she lost. And she performs, yes, a ritual. And if you check out on her biog, I mean, she talks about blood rituals she does as well, which I don't want to go into, but this person is, and the Irish the Irish establishment were loving this, Bambi Thug. And of course, she's very political. She wanted to see Israel banned from the song contest. And I just thought, well, I remember Dana in 1970. More to the point, I remember ABBA from 1974 when Waterloo won, which is my favorite moment. I'm a huge ABBA fan, particularly of Agnetha, I have to say, the blonde. And that was back when music was music. Now music is essentially satanic ritualism being played out, infecting in young minds. And I just think, in a way, it does symbolize these times. Now, happily, it didn't. The Irish entry didn't win. But the song that did win was a non-binary Swiss rapper, Marcus. So that's not really much of an improvement. They weren't obviously as demonic as Bambi Thug was, clearly. And in fact, we shouldn't even really call her she, because of course she's also non-binary.
Oh, yes.
Everybody in the EuroVision is non-binary. But it is a moment in our history where occultism it's just there. And honestly, you see, by speaking out about it, you get all that. I mean, there's a fair bit of abuse thrown my way just because I said, well, look, she says she's a witch. And there's interviews of her screaming, I'm a witch. And final thought on her, just briefly, I saw, maybe you saw it as well. I saw photographs of her a couple of years before she became this persona, Bambi Thug. Just I presume it was taken in a pub or somewhere, and there's a picture of her, and she's a very attractive young girl, probably early 20s, whatever. And you look at that image of her, and you look at the demonic persona, and the profound point is, this is what happens. This is why I think those of us who have a Christian faith have to be strong, because when people walk away from God, other forces fill them up. And I look at that young girl and I feel a bit bad for her, because she's filled up with bad stuff. And, yes, it's celebrated in the EuroVision. They loved it all. But happily, she came sixth. So there's maybe a slight upside to that. But all pretty grim.
Well, she came sixth, and they told her the result at 6 minutes past 6 in the morning. So she was quite happy. She got a full house. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah. These things, exactly. These things are, they're not accidental. I mean, no. I don't believe in accidents. Everything is pretty much there if you want to see it. Half the world looks the other way, or maybe 80% of the world looks the other way. But yeah, you do see these little symbolisms. But there was nothing, I've never seen anything as symbolic as her performance. And it makes you think what it'll be like. I mean, that was 50 years from Waterloo. I mean, I sort of said, I think I quipped, well, the EuroVision finally meets its Waterloo, because it's now possessed, it's now demonic, it's now satanic. We see it, and the years going forward, I think it'll get worse before it gets better. Frankly, what the EuroVision needs is an exorcism.
I think the whole Europe needs an exorcism. You can start with a high priestess, van der Leyen. Because I can only see the flames and the demonic look in her eyes. She's one of the worst people and worst characters that I can ever imagine would have any power whatsoever. We interview regularly someone who claims to be a friend of hers, and we've no reason to doubt him. And we say, well, we've all got a cross to bear, but please take holy water when you're around her. Just sprinkle a little on to see what happens. But on the theme of demonology, right? This is coming out into the fore. What were your thoughts of King Charles's portrait?
Satanic, absolutely satanic. No ambiguity in this one. I mean, everything about it's weird. I mean, the him standing there as if he's in the fires of hell. Number one, bizarre imagery. I think it's overt occultism that we're being that that we were showing. And the really bad thing, I went and I looked to see what was the first official picture portrait of his mother, Queen Elizabeth. And you go back to that, and it's completely normal. It's just like normal photograph of, she was obviously very young when she came to the throne. Obviously, he's a lot older. But when I see him standing there, and that particular image, here's the kicker. That's the image that councils and public institutions all around the UK are being invited to put up. Well, I'm sorry, I just see that as an advance of a satanic agenda, and I see him right at the heart, which is hard for me to say as someone who hitherto would have been, broadly speaking, pro-monarchy, and I'm still not necessarily anti-monarchy, but not this particular one. But it's so in your face. And also, I mean, the artist, if you've looked at the work that the artist that was chosen, I think Tim Yo's son.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, again, very, very strange, very, very strange. And you got to wonder, what message are they sending us with that portrait? And I think there's a message there, and those who have eyes can see it, Marcus.
Exactly. And it's not like King Charles hasn't got form.
No.
When you look at his alliances with Jimmy Savile for 40 years. Now, this upsets a lot of our viewers, Herd Immunity News viewers, but we will have to say it like it is, because when you turn the photographs upside down, now, okay, people want to manipulate it, but it's the perfect head of the Baphomet.
It is Baphomet. Yep.
So,
And yes, it is. And people say, yeah, but if you invert and mirror anything, you get the Baphomet. But even if that was true, that's still a reason to be really concerned about it. Like, that's, again, you know, like we fight powers and principalities on this earth. That's who our enemies are. And I see that totally manifest. Charles has form, absolutely has form. And the other aspect of this that I find so weird is, it's all this publicity that's being generated around him. You know, he's got cancer, but he's had chemo and he doesn't lose his hair or anything, looks fine. Weird, even as Princess Katherine is not to be found. Where's Princess Katherine? Well, don't talk about that. So I just find it's a really weird year for the royals. So you have King Charles gets cancer, gets better. How? Not sure. And Princess Catherine gets cancer, vanishes. Then King Charles gets his satanic, as I call it, anyone who's familiar with the Rolling Stones, his satanic majesty, portrait. And I'm just thinking, whoa, where is it? What's going to come next? You know, Marcus, it's a wild rock and roll ride we're on.
I mean, the odds of 3 members of the royal family, because don't forget, Fergie, even though she is a distant, they all announced that they had cancer within a week of each other.
Yes.
I mean, the odds on anything like that ever happening would be astronomical. And the royal family never used to tell anybody about when the Queen, Her Majesty, the late great Queen Elizabeth II, who never really put a foot wrong. Obviously, people will bring up things on a certain trip to Canada about what happened, but we can't verify that. But compared to Charles and certainly Andrew, her behaviour is saintly.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I really don't know where this royal family is going to go, because I'm very suspicious about Princess Catherine. I have to be honest. Last seen in public, realistically, 25th of December 2023. So 6 months. And you know, like, again, the cancer thing is weird, Marcus, because like, no one wishes cancer in anybody. Obviously not. We're all decent people and we don't want that. Sure. The statistical chances of all those royals suddenly getting it, it's weird. And then they're being treated with chemo, and Charles he looks pretty good on it to me. I don't know what you think. I think he looks okay on it. Something's wrong on the Catherine side. Something's very wrong there, I think. And the other part of me that worries is, just as we've got the likes of, Pfizer and Moderna saying, don't listen, we've got a new mRNA cancer jab. It's really, really good. I just wonder, are we being set up for a sucker punch that says, oh, see, Charles, he's better now because he tried the new mRNA cancer jab? We don't know that. We don't know how he's exactly been treated. We don't even know what his cancer is. So Yeah, the royals bother me, and that portrait was absolutely, cherry on the icing, because what it's so in your face. And everyone's supposed to bow down. Well, maybe they are supposed to bow down, you see. Maybe that's the other thing. Bow down to this, as I put it, this infernal portrait of His Majesty.
Well, all a lot of amazing points there, and you've connected up the promotion that the royal family got involved with, and even the late Queen, she was probably pushed into this, was to promote the COVID-19 jab, which is now proven in many cases to be deadly, and there's no doubt about that. We've got 15,000 people claiming an injury or death right now. These are people who have been infected or affected, the same way we're hearing with the blood situation that's going on right now. So, I mean, on the royal family, look, there are none so blind as those who will not see. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, agreed.
So, just get your thoughts then, please. We've got a wee bit longer left. We try not to run on too late.
No problem. I'm all good.
Oh, you're all good. Well, great. On the COVID inquiry and looking at the blood, the infected blood inquiry now, that says that there's 30,000 people were involved. This was the factor that was used. It was used from prisons. It was used from all sorts of areas that you would never want any blood for haemophiliacs. This has affected 3,000 deaths. This has caused that we know of. Already people are saying, David, like yourself, you just touched on, the COVID inquiry will do absolutely nothing. There's been a memo 618 served on it, which is basically a D notice. So the decision's already been made, and it's been made for security reasons. Right? This is national security reasons. We've interviewed someone who actually knows the presiding judge, Dame Heather Hallett, very, very well indeed. And he said she's been served with a memo that says nothing will ever come out. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would completely go with that, that nothing will come out. This is classic British establishment doing a cover-up job now to hold. They want to hold the line in this one for about 40 years or so, and then eventually truth will come out, because truth is coming out, but just like with the infected blood, if you can delay it long enough, like a lot of that infected blood stuff was people were given those transfusions back in the 70s, 80s. Well, the truth is, the people that were involved in the cover-up and the lies in the NHS and the political establishment, they've retired, or they might even be dead. So you can't go after them. The government can give, we give you compensation of X, Y, Z. But this is not about money. This is about holding individuals accountable for their actions. Now, we've seen that that's not happening when it comes to the infected blood. So over COVID, where I believe the actual true death figure will be massively higher, let alone the people who have had life-changing injuries, they're going to drag that one out as well. It's the tried and tested method that they do. All they have to do is give it another 20, 30 years if they can. And by that point, a lot of us critics, I'm guessing in 30 years' time, I mightn't be that prominent a voice from this earthly realm anyway, maybe from up high or down below. But I think that's the game that they want to play, just keep dragging it. And if you listen to people like Penny Mordaunt in Westminster and stuff, and like, say what you will about Andrew Bridgen, but he's pretty tenacious on this issue, at least, almost uniquely in Parliament. And like, they're still pretending, the jabs, these vaccines are safe, effective, everything's fine. This is the game that they'll play. Labour will come in. They don't want to hear anything. They certainly won't want to expose any truth. So you can see the path being built up, another 5 years, then another 5. And and before we know where we are, memories fade. That's one thing that I have learned, even over between 2020 and today, right? It amazes me how some people have forgotten. I've forgotten nothing. I remember everything, every iniquity that was done. I remember the shops and the restaurants that wouldn't let me in because I was unmasked. It wouldn't have anything to do with I wouldn't comply with anything. I've remembered, I've not forgiven, but other people have. And that's only after 4 years. So give it 10 years. And maybe in 15 years' time, people will be sort of, there was that thing in the early 2020s, but it's a long time ago now. We shouldn't forget, because, of
No.
course, they'll do it again. That's the other thing. It's obvious what's coming.
Well, Dr. Robert Malone, the virologist who had 9 patents of these mRNA vaccine technology, he talked about mass formation psychosis.
Yes.
And there's also a mass formation amnesia. That there's so much information, David, that's put out. I mean, it's hard to keep track, but you do, because if you don't mind me saying, you're a critical thinker. That's me giving you. I'm putting you on the highest possible platform, because it doesn't matter about your IQ. If you don't have the ability to think critically, you're done. You're finished, and you'll queue up for your next jab. Is that fair?
Yeah. And that's absolutely. I mean, that was again the big lesson for me in 2020. Those of us who didn't go along with the herd, we were the critical thinkers. I mean, I remember even way back in March of 2020, my wife and I sitting talking about this whole thing that was emerging. And they were telling us that, oh, you can have this asymptomatic. Remember that was one of the comedy aspects. You can have it steadily, but you mightn't know that you have it, and you might feel fine. And we just looked at each other and said, what? I've got this Spanish flu, which wasn't Spanish and wasn't the flu. I've got this, and yet I don't know that I've got it, but I have to be very worried. No, I mean, it does not compute. It doesn't matter if Dr. Hilary Jones tells me that. It doesn't matter that the establishment media shove it down my throat. It doesn't make sense. And so that's why I urge everyone, never take me at everything I say. Think for yourself. Ask yourself the question, do the things that I say, is it logical? Does it kind of hang together? And I hope it does. But the stuff that's been going on, none of it hangs together. That's why we're living in extraordinary times where George Orwell, if he could come back, he would see the complete fulfillment of 1984 plus the rest of it, because really we are being asked to accept that up is, down is up and right is left, and, all the rest of it. So critical thinking is I think it's what saved us. I mean, I don't consider myself any better than the next man or woman, just an ordinary person. But I will look at things and think, does that make sense to me? And honestly, it didn't. Nothing. In fact, nothing has. Ukraine, Russia doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Does not compute with me. Even the Israel-Gaza thing doesn't completely make sense to me. Climate change doesn't make sense to me. The trans narrative, none of it makes sense. But then, as I say, I do believe we're in this spiritual warfare, and we're the people at the coalface of it. We feel it. We recognize it. Whether it's Bambi Thug in EuroVision, or whether it's get your booster, or whether it's let's make sure that our elderly or midazolam, all of that. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, and once you see it, you can't go back. That's the other. I can't go back. This is, for better or worse, I don't know how it's going to work out for me as individual human being, but I can't unsee, and I have to keep doing my honestly best to speak up, and people can agree with me or not, as the case may be.
Well, look, it says it all. I will not submit. I will not comply. And I believe you 1,000% that when you walked into that store, they confronted you with this bullshit regulations. You knew exactly that you would not budge. You would not falter. You would not back down from these people, because they're pathetic. And that's being polite.
But the thing about it is, I was taken off Twitter. I was removed in the September of 2020. So that was like, kind of peak COVID scares time. And that was deliberate, obviously, for a couple of years before I came back. And one of the last things I did before they got me, I went into, I don't know if I told you this before, apologies if I repeat it, but all I did was I went into a garden center, outdoor garden center, took a selfie of myself without a mask on, and I was complaining about the fact that, why am I the only person in here without a mask on? And 2 hours later, the police came to my front gate to come up to talk to me. And the way it works is this, and this is the sort of person I am, the more you try to tell me to conform and to comply, you're going to get the opposite reaction. I'm too contrarian. I won't do it. So you're dead right. When I said I wouldn't comply, I won't submit to it, because to do that would be to lose the essence of what I think it matters, and that means to yourself be true, you know. And so there's good people out there who maybe thought they were doing the right thing, wearing masks, taking jabs, and I'm not here to judge anyone else, but by the same token, it was right to resist it, and it's right to resist all of the stuff that's going on. And where people like yourself, from I say, and your channel and all the other ones, you all give me hope, because I can see that there are plenty of us, you know, where we are true people, and we are straight and non-complying, and that means a lot. Because sometimes, like here in Northern Ireland, it was quite a lonely place for me, but then I met up with other people across the political spectrum. And yeah, I remember being at a rally, standing talking to a Marxist, but even though he was a Marxist, he was 100% against what was going on. Yeah. And so the bigger bond is our shared humanity. The bigger bond is our recognition that we're free men and women, and we're staying that way, and we will not submit. And that's what drives me on. That's what gets me up, and that's what gets me doing podcasts and doing videos, doing everything. It's this kind of engine inside that says, you're sort of doing the right thing. Okay, I get stuff wrong. Everyone does. But my intention is, to use another, I'm always one to borrow a phrase, my aim is true. To quote renowned singer-songwriter, my aim is true, Elvis Costello. So I just keep going at it, you know, and yeah, just that's the way it is.
Indeed, and God bless you for doing it, and all power to you for doing it, because it's a calling. You couldn't go any other path. It would be impossible for you. You're very, as you said, your very soul, your very spirit, your existence. And we're getting people coming out like Andrew Bridgen. Maybe there's one or two, a handful. Neil Hanvey, former SNP MP. So there's two, maybe Chris Chope to a much lesser extent, a Conservative MP. And they're coming out. There's 3 people out of 650 willing to take a stand. Andrew Bridgen obviously kicked out the Conservative Party for his efforts. But we had a very interesting conversation with a former GCHQ intelligence officer. And he brought up something interesting. I want to put this to you, see if you're aware of this. That members of parliament who are in the military, it's a constitutional irregularity. They should not be in there because they serve and take orders from whichever force that they're serving with. And that includes Penny Mordaunt. We were actually talking about Tobias Ellwood, the warmonger and lobbyist for the military-industrial complex. I'm sure you've seen him. You probably hit the remote control button as soon as you can. You see old Ellwood coming up. Obviously, he's a Europhile as well. I mean, what about that sort of thing when you got former GCHQ officers coming out into the alternative media like this and saying that we have constitutional irregularities when we've got military personnel serving in government?
Yes, I have heard that. I'm aware of that. And that's absolutely, as far as I can see, absolutely right. But it's like, I believe that if you take the Penny Mordaunt's of this world, these people have a loyalty, not to us, the British people, or not to the people that elect them even. Her loyalty, as far as I can see, is to Mr. Bill Gates, who I believe she co-authored a book with. Globalism has gobbled up these people, you know, and they don't have a bone of patriotism in their body, because if they did, they probably wouldn't be in the position that they are. And you know, these 77th Brigaders, such as you've just mentioned, I mean, these people, you know, absolute appalling characters. But so is Westminster. Do you know? I mean, like, Oliver Cromwell sort of had the right idea, you know. You've sat there too long, you know, in God's name, go now. He sort of has a point, you know. I know exactly. Yeah, that place behind you there. They've sat there too long. I look upon it as, you know, a kind of a sepulcher for actual democracy to a significant degree. There are some MPs who have some virtues. It would be wrong to say that they're all a bad lot.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are. And as you say, one hand, probably you could count all the decent ones. So, you know, but that's why, as I said at the beginning of this, we shouldn't look to MPs. This is not going to be solved by MPs. There's no political solution to our problems. I keep saying this. There's not. Now, there are solutions, but they are not political solutions. And one of the most fundamental solutions is for every one of us to look inside of us and make sure we can be the very best person that we can be, the most responsible, grandparent, father, mother, son, whatever, diligent, true. These are the things we need to look in ourselves, get ourselves right first, and then connect with like-minded people. And I think this is the way we're going to have to do it. I'm all for, well, John Lennon wanted to start a revolution in his bed. I wouldn't quite go that far, but I have metaphorically revolutionary thoughts in my mind, because the battle's coming. And in fact, actually, it's here, Mark. The battle is here. We just have to realize we are in a battle. And I think once you recognize that, then you put your armor on, your metaphysical armor on, if you can, and if you have principles and you have a good, strong faith, I think we're fit for the battle, and I believe, ultimately, I do believe that right prevails against evil, and I know it will. So all we have to do is keep going. And, I think in the final analysis, whether we live to see it or not, it's a different matter. But, we have to keep going as if we will. And that's exactly where I am.
Absolutely. And you've seen it. We're going to finally come on to the United States of America, because we know you've got you've got a very large American audience and followers, and you've interviewed some American influencers and American politicians.
Yeah.
Mostly, I think, mostly from the Republican Party, which would be our side of the political. I'd like to see a debate between you and someone like Kamala Harris. I'd pay good money to see that.
Yeah, but I don't understand gibberish, and she only speaks. No. I'm not fluent in gibberish. She is.
I think it's some sort of Aleister Crowley demonic speaking of tongues that she's uttering and gibbering.
Right.
But what's going on right now with President Trump, who's leading in all the polls, he's leading in the swing states. It looks like it's going to be a landslide victory if he's given a fair run, which we maintain that he wasn't. It was a robbery in 2020.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to get your views on the whole Trump situation. Is he going to get through this lawfare? Is he going to get to run? And will he win?
Okay, so I think he will get through the lawfare. I think they'd be too scared to put him in prison, but they might. And if they do, he will definitely win then. Because Trump, look, I know Trump has his critics, and I know not everything's perfect there, and I have huge problems with his Operation Warp Speed and all of that. But in the real world, you've got two choices. You've got Donald Trump, who more or less is hated by the globalists, I think. And you've got Joe Biden, who's demented, just demented. And so for the sake of the world and for the sake of America, I clearly want to see Donald Trump return. And you're right. If you look at the polls in the swing states, I mean, it's a horror show for Joe Biden. And the other interesting thing is that if you look at the black vote, which is so critical to the Democrat Party, there's a percentage of that black vote has slewed off from 2020. And some of it's maybe going to go to RFK Jr., which is good, because that'll further weaken Biden. So it all sounds good. My worry, and I'm sure you have the same worry, and we all did, anyone who sat up in 2020, and you're going to bed. I went to bed happy Trump's in, and then they did the fiddle. It's perfectly obvious what happened. Could they do it again? And this is where I'm not sure. I mean, I've spoken, as you say, to some of this, like Carrie Lake, for example, about this. And she said, well, no, we know what they did, and we're going to make sure we stop it. She didn't convince me. I'm not convinced of that, to be honest. So it's like, I want it to happen. I don't want to be crushed the next day like I was back in 2020. But everything's looking good. And as long as Trump keeps it together, and I mean, the debates are going to be brilliant. I'm really looking forward to Trump debating Biden. And I see Trump is saying he wants to make sure they do drug tests beforehand, because I think old Joe gets a little bit of assistance, let's say, in his body. So I think, look, it's for Trump to lose it, because I think he's already won it. But the Democrats have they perfected stealing, cheating. But for the sake of America, I really would love to see Donald Trump get his much-deserved second term, and I hope his judgment's better in his second term. But you know something? imperfect as he is, he's still 1,000,000% better than Joe Biden. And the other reason to want it is, can you imagine the emotional meltdown on social media?
Yeah.
And here, even in the UK, can you imagine the BBC's salty tears? Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Can you imagine the SNP's salty tears, Sinn Féin's salty tears? They all despise Trump.
Yeah.
And so for no other reason, I like him. I want him back.
Well, it's important for the West to have this man back. It's important because the one last thing we have to ask you about, is the BRICS alliance. Now, obviously, Donald Trump had a much stronger and respected relationship between President Putin and President Xi in China. The BRICS alliance is going from strength to strength, all based on their cheap energy. They've got no net zero policies worth a damn. Obviously, it's sinking us, and a country is only as strong sometimes as its energy, David, what it can actually produce. Where do you see the BRICS alliance going, and where do you see the conflicts that Russia and China are involved with, especially in Ukraine? Where do you see that finishing up?
Well, you see, I have a lot of time for the BRICS. I mean, one of the groups of people that I've got a fairly lot of followers is Indian people. A lot of Indians follow me, right? Yeah. In fact, I'm speaking in Parliament in a fortnight's time to an Indian human rights and Asian human rights, talking about the beleaguered Uyghurs in China, talking about the Pashtuns in Pakistan, and they've very kindly asked me to come along and stuff, because I do believe that, you know, we should speak out to those who are persecuted and who maybe can't. But the BRICS, which includes obviously India as well, and Prime Minister Modi, I've been a long time supporter of. And you know, the thing about it is that the West feels to me like we're in the final days of Rome. It feels like that to me. Even Trump, I don't know if he can completely stop it. He might stall it for 4 years. But I see that everything that the likes of NATO have done, totally counterproductive. They've driven Russia into China's arms. Got to be careful when you get into China's arms, but that's happened. India's sort of third party, a wee bit removed from that, but still not buying into the whole NATO scam. And so it's fascinating. It fascinates me, the BRICS alliances and the way in which the dollar. Remember, if the petrodollar is replaced, boom, that's the end of the US, economically destroyed.
The whole West,
yeah, because it's all built on that. Yeah, but I think the demise of the whole Ukraine sanctions. Look at what's happened because of the sanctions that the West put upon Russia. Look at the price that Russia's paying for energy. Look at the price that China's paying for energy, India. And then look at the price we're paying for energy. You know, so the West shoots itself in the foot. And I'm not even sure, maybe it's even deliberate. It has to be, doesn't it? It must. Nobody would be that stupid. So we're shooting. It's almost like there's a force in the West to bring us down. And the East is rising. The BRICS is rising. And it's the same with the trans narrative as well. Like, that's just totally destructive of society. Saw the Church of Scotland today endorsing the trans narrative, right? Don't know if you saw that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. 100% behind the trans narrative. Apparently, trans people are part of the Church of Scotland, must be respected. I refer them to Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 5. They should check that out. Maybe they don't know their Bible. But the moral decay in the West isn't as obvious to me amongst the BRICS. So when I look at Russia and I look at even China, you know, I know China, there's issues. Sure, I understand that. I've just talked about the Uyghurs, but I do understand that the BRICS seems to be a good economic bet for me. And it seems to be holding on to retaining some of the stuff that we used to have. And, you know, the final thought I would offer you was, I saw a video on social media today of, don't know if you saw it, it was, it must have been US Navy taking on one of their warships. And it's basically a US Marine of some sort. And it shows him with his back to the camera. He turns around, he minces around, he puts his lipstick on, and I'm thinking, actually, this is a metaphor. It's a video, but it's a metaphor for this is what it's like when a society, a civilization is in fast free fall decay. Could Donald Trump stop that? He might, but the BRICS is rising. The best thing Trump could do would be to align with the BRICS, abandon the rotten EU. That would be
NATO.
something.
Walk away from NATO.
NATO, because NATO is the axis of evil, in my opinion. And I never thought I would say that, Marcus, but I honestly, genuinely believe NATO is the axis of evil for what it's been doing, seeking World War III, which it's been definitely at now since 2014. And it'd be great if Trump was to do that. But in the meantime, you've got a solid axis there: China, India, Russia. These are the major powers, and I don't see them going anywhere. They're not going to go away, and I think things will play more into their path. So and Chinese curse me. You live in interesting times. We definitely do.
We definitely do. Just a quick note on that. I think that our traitor class, which is all the Western regimes, all the governments and the services, the secret security services, the majority of them have been compromised so badly. There are great people within our security services, and God bless them. But I think this is a massive game of insider trading, David, where these people know. I mean, Jeremy Hunt's wife, for the love of God, works for the CCP. Even though she said she's only in the media, she works for the CCP. This is the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I think they've invested in the Chinese, Indian, Brazilian, South African companies. I think they know the West is tanking. They've moved their own personal wealth onto those countries. So we have things like net zero, as you say, trans ideology, which has us like a dog chasing its tail. It's lunacy. I mean, we put out a clip that went viral. It was President Putin saying, "The West is run by demonic pedophiles." Why would you tell Chinese children that men are women and women are men? Can't argue with that, can you?
Can't argue, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly right. And I think you're right. It probably is just a grand insider trading deal. So, but then I think that's deliberate because they know that ultimately, look at US debt, look at British debt. Ultimately, there's going to be the biggest crash ever in the West. But that mightn't affect them if they've got their assets in the BRICS. So actually, all that happens is you, me, everybody watching this, we will be impoverished. Everything we have could be taken from us. Maybe that is,
central banking, digital currency.
All that, but they're going to be okay, and that's always the plan. The plan is that there will be a small elite, in my opinion, that they will survive. They'll be comfortable. They'll eat meat. They want the rest of us eating Z-bugs, and they want the rest of us not having ability to travel, all the rest of it. That's their agenda. And they only can achieve that if they destroy what we have. It's not about build back better. Forget that. It's about destroying. We are watching horribly in slow-mo the actual implosion of Western civilization. What a time to be alive, Marcus. But I've got to say, it gives me a lot of stuff to talk about.
Amazing stuff to talk about. And you've been very gracious with your time. Incredibly gracious. But look, we always leave our guests with a little ray of hope. A little bit, we don't mean to be contrite or glib, but positivity at the end. You know, that little bit of light that they speak about in the Bible and the holy teachings? That little light, that little flicker. Now, obviously, you're not a man who's going to comply. You are not going to go down. They'll have to basically take you out before anything else. What, in the last minute or two, we'll give you the last word. What is your advice to our listeners and viewers?
Well, I think that it is important that we retain a sense of we are on the right side. We are aligned with what really matters, and what really matters operates at a much higher level than things on this earth. And so we have an obligation to God, I believe, to fight the good fight. And as I said earlier, I think if we reason things critically, we will not be lost. I think if we unite with like-minded people, like you and I are doing, everyone listening to this, I think there's a real energy. I feel it amongst our people, and so therefore, I'm actually not that despondent. I do see tribulations. I see all the stuff. I'm sure you see it. I'm sure everyone watching sees it. I see all that coming, but I do think we will prevail because we have right on our side, and right, we're told in the Bible, ultimately will in this spiritual warfare. It will out. So we live in the devil's realm. I mean, so it doesn't surprise me, all the stuff that we see. I just think that we shouldn't be despondent because they want that. They want us to be negative. They want us to be defeated. Well, no, absolutely not. We should, if the worst possible case scenario, we go out literally fighting. We will not comply. We're not going along with what they want. And they hate that as well. So that's another reason to keep our backs sort of flexed and be remorseless. And that's all I can say to everyone. You know, and if we all unite and we've got each other to lean upon, and we've got our faith to lean upon, then what's to fear? There's nothing to fear but fear itself.
That's a perfect way to end the interview right there. And we'll just all say to our viewers and listeners, if you haven't seen David Vance's incredible work, go on to davidvance.net. We'll leave the links to that. There's so many fantastic interviews about an amazing range of subjects, and your own point to camera. The monologues and things that you do are fantastic. We'll also leave the links to your Twitter page as well. But listen, David, thank you very much again for appearing on Herd Immunity News, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Great to see you again. Take care, everyone.